Well, hello and welcome to Cambridge once again. Today I thought I'd show you an amazing African orchid from the Angraecum family. Now this is a miniature orchid and I keep it hanging up over here because this is the area of the greenhouse that is sort of as warm as I can make it. It's not as warm as it would like, but it does reasonably well. I'll just bring it closer. This is Podangis dactyloceras. It likes warm, humid conditions, but it does like to dry out between waterings. So that's why I've got it growing on this cork mount. And you can see it has grown quite nice roots that have clung quite well to the mount. It has been watered this morning, and a couple of weeks ago I added a little bit more sphagnum moss for the summer so that it just preserves a little bit more moisture. Now you can see the roots haven't really started growing yet. You can just about see this one is beginning to grow. And although it looks quite wet at the moment, that's because it was only watered a couple of hours ago and it hasn't had time to dry off. But by evening it will be completely dried off and just remain sort of just damp. In the winter, and this is why I've got it mounted, when I first had it, I think it came in a pot, and I had a lot of trouble with rot developing low down in the sort of centre of the plant, and so I decided it would be best mounted. If I bring it really close, you can see the flowers are just amazing. It's almost glass-like. And I assume it's moth-pollinated, like many of the Angraecum family, and you can just about see there's a spur, and there's just, in fact I can see there's the nectar at the bottom of it. And the other incredible thing is that the flowers are very long-lasting, at least 2 weeks. Anyway, so that's my Podangis dactyloceras, and it has this quite attractive sort of fan of leaves. And on the mount, I think it presents itself really well. If you look on the internet, there are quite a lot of images of this orchid. About half of them are growing in pots and half of them are growing mounted. And eventually, they will sort of divide and produce more than 2 growing points and sort of bush out. And there are a few photographs on the internet where there are absolutely magnificent specimens. Right, next on the list is this miniature Phalaenopsis, Phalaenopsis parishii. Now, again, this is an orchid that I've had for a very long time, over 5 years, I think. And I bought it as a really tiny little plant. I think it probably came in a pot, but I quite quickly decided to mount it. And this flowers reliably for me every year. It comes from the eastern Himalayas through to Indochina, up to about 500 meters. So it is warm growing, and as I said before with the Podangis, it doesn't really get as warm conditions as it would like. And it has never really grown as well as it would do if it got more warmth. But it is a lovely little miniature Phalaenopsis. As you can see, I mounted it on a cork mount a long time ago. I don't think I've got a note of when. And it has these huge roots in relation to the plant. The foliage is never really beautiful in my case. It has a sort of bluey green colour, and in my case it tends to sort of develop a covering of light algae from being frequently misted every morning. But it flowers amazingly reliably every year. This has got 1, 2, 3 flower spikes. It's been out in bloom already for about 3 weeks. You can just see the first flower there that has finished. But the flowers are really absolutely exquisite, beautifully mocked. There is actually a white alba version, but I think this normal version with the pink markings is the most beautiful to have. Now people say it is scented. It has a very faint, pleasant scent to me at the moment. Somebody else on the internet said it smells strongly of lily of the valley, particularly in the morning. And the interesting thing is, this is my Phalaenopsis lobii, which is another miniature, but as you can see, this isn't a flower at the moment, this is well over. So Phalaenopsis parishii is really useful in that it actually more or less follows on from Phalaenopsis lobii to flower at this time of the year. And another miniature, in fact a micro miniature that is in flower at the moment is this one right up here. This is Schoenorchis scolopendria, and it grows in Vietnam up to about 1100 meters, so it likes reasonably warm conditions. In fact, a bit warmer really than I can manage in this greenhouse, which is why I have it hanging high up. And as you can see, it's gradually sort of enveloping this piece of wood that it came on when I bought it. It's actually growing around the back now. You'll notice that the leaves currently are quite a sort of purply colour, and that's an indication, in fact, that it's getting a bit too much light. So from having it hanging up in the interests of getting plenty of air movement so that it doesn't stay wet for too long, and keeping it warm, it's actually, now that we're into summer, it's getting too much light, and I'm going to move it down a bit. If you look at the photographs on the internet, most of them, the leaves are just with a tint of pink at the tips, but mostly dark green. So this is going to have to move when I finish filming it. It's now very firmly attached with aerial roots to the piece of wood that it came on. And in fact now I could quite usefully remove the original tires very carefully, which will improve its appearance. Now you need to be quite careful because they tend to grow over, and some of them can actually adhere to the whatever it is that you've been tying them on with. But you can just then carefully, no, in fact, you see what I mean? Let's just snip through there. Might need to leave a few little bits of the elastic, it's not going to do any harm. And pull out, and lastly these bits there. Right, that's better, that looks a lot better. Right, now this is my Lepanthes calodictyon, which I put on this mount about a year ago. I did a video on this, and I'll put the details on screen so that you can look it up. I am amazed that I've not only still got this, but it's doing really well, because it is a tricky orchid to grow. But since I put it on the mount, and bear in mind this is my third attempt at growing this orchid, the two earlier ones I failed, not miserably, but I'd failed and eventually ended up killing them. But having got a bit more experience in keeping it moist, humid, not too much sun, never letting it dry out, I've been really successful with this, and it is a fantastic little orchid to grow. So I thought I'd show you this because I'm kind of amazed that I've still got it and that it's doing really well. I did notice, and this comes back to what I was saying about the Schoenorchis scolopendria just now, you can actually see that the leaves are quite a dark green, just with a hint almost of bronzing. And that is because since the weather has, well, it's questionable actually, since the weather has warmed up, or certainly the days are much longer and we are getting more light levels, it was actually getting a bit too much light. So I did have it hanging up, higher up, and when I noticed it beginning to get probably a little bit too much light, I then moved it down, which is why I've now got it hanging over here on a basket containing one of my Coelogene speciosa varieties. Now, has it got? Yes, it has. I also noticed, in fact, that it had, whereas it had been producing nice new shoots all the way through most of the time, it has sort of stopped growing a bit, but this does actually have a nice new shoot coming here. And as I said before, this gets sprayed every morning and then allowed to more or less dry out, but not really dry out ever. That seems to be the key to it. And the other orchid that I am also delighted to still have looking pretty good is this Lepanthes telepogoniflora. And again, I did a video on this, so let me just come round so that I can film it properly. This, when did I redo this? That was not a year ago, about 9 or 10 months ago. And I put it on this piece of tree fern trunk. And this has been in flower more or less ever since. And again, this is a tricky orchid to grow, and I had failed in the past. It has these ridiculously large flowers on a tiny little plant, but it is doing really pretty well. It's actually forming quite a decent clump, and it continually keeps producing new flowering shoots. It has had at least one flower open for months, pretty much ever since I put it on a new mount. This one has just finished, and this one is just about to open, because they do produce, in fact you can just about see there, can you see? This has so far produced 1, 2, 3, 4, this is the 5th flower on this spike, so they're quite incredible plants. Now this, as I say, this lives, in this case, hanging up on the side of another Coelogene, and the basket of this has got lots of sphagnum moss. It's over here where I keep it a bit warmer than the Lepanthes calodictyon that I just showed you, because this comes from, I think, lower altitude, so I try to keep it sort of a bit warmer, and there's a sort of heated mat here which gives it a bit of extra warmth in this greenhouse. I also tend to keep this on balance a little bit moister more consistently than the Lepanthes calodictyon. Right, now I don't know if anybody noticed, probably not, but on the sort of when I opened this video, there are now unusually quite a few of these things sitting around in the greenhouse, and that is because this year, unusually, I've never really been troubled with them a lot before, but this year thrips have been a particular problem, particularly on large juicy flowers like cattleyas, and plants like this Coelogene calcicola, which has it's a huge plant, and it's not really a very good choice for me because it's taking up all the room. It has this, it takes an incredibly long time to develop. You can see a new flower spike developing here on this new growth which has grown this year. This flower spike took over a year to gradually develop, but it started opening its flowers in succession about 4 to 6 weeks ago, and then it will carry on doing so. But the flowers have been ruined by thrips. They go over very quickly. They seem to be particularly attracted to the larger, juicier flowers that produce a lot of nectar. like some of the cotyledons and cattleyas. Now, I only started introducing it about a week or so ago, so they haven't really had time to take effect because they will not kill the adult stage of the thrips, but they will attack the earlier forms of the insect. So it takes a little while to sort of catch up. But the point is, thrips, there is no really effective way of killing thrips, at least not using chemicals that are available to amateurs in this country anymore. So really, predatory mites, which is what this involves, are the answer. And in fact, a lot of commercial growers use predatory mites for a whole range of pests now, extremely effectively. The outlay isn't huge in the overall scheme of things. And whilst I was at it, I actually got some predatory mites to control red spider mite as well, which again is another very difficult pest to control, certainly with chemicals. Let me just show you. Now, there are lots of videos on biological controls and particularly predatory mites and thrips on the internet, so if you are interested, I strongly recommend you look them up. And they're very easy to buy by mail order, and they come in these typically sachets with a little hole normally in the back. It takes, they say, up to a week for the little mites inside to start waking up and develop to such a stage that they exit. And then you just simply put these packets amongst the plants, particularly those that are being affected badly, and then they crawl out and start attacking your pests. Very simple, very innocuous, and it's much better than using chemicals. This is a packet which a friend who runs a commercial nursery gave me about 2 or 3 weeks ago, which was already active. And in fact, if you see, and you need a really strong magnifying glass, you can see the tiny little mites actually all over the packet. And the predatory mites are the ones that move around really fast, not surprisingly. So they're cunning little beasts and really useful in a greenhouse environment like this, or in the home. And as I say, it saves using chemicals. Really marvellous. I can see one just here actually, running around now. Let me see if I can show it to you. Right, well, I'm going to pop this packet back on the cotyledon where the mites, instead of running around on the packet, can actually start doing some good. Now, I thought I'd finish up by showing you this, not a miniature, of course, but this is Dendrobium farmeri, which is actually all the flowers just suddenly came out. This one came out yesterday afternoon, and then by this morning they were all in bloom. No scent, unfortunately, but absolutely beautiful flowers. Really lovely. And it's not too big growing. And I have a bit of a sort of issue with dendrobiums. And in fact, I've just passed on to a better home, one of my biggest ones that was getting far too big. A lot of the dendrobiums that produce tall canes, or at least long canes, because in the wild they, perched on the side of a tree or branch, they grow up, and then as they develop they gradually grow out and then eventually can become pendant. Now in this greenhouse, of course, I can't accommodate many orchids like that because there just isn't room. And I'm particularly not keen on trussing an orchid up in a very unnatural fashion. So I much prefer orchids that I can allow to do their own thing and grow more naturally, which is one of the advantages of growing orchids mounted, of course. So let me just show you. This is my Dendrobium lawsii. As you can see, I put a packet on here to control any thrips that might be coming on this, because it's just about to come into flower. And this is growing pretty much as it would do in the wild, and I love that. So what I'm doing is just concentrating on having a few dendrobiums, or this type of dendrobium I can allow to grow in a natural way, or as natural way as possible. and then stick to other Dendrobiums. Of course, there are just hundreds to choose from, that are more compact and, in my case, are more, well, I find sort of better behaved, as it were. Right, well, I've been editing this video. This is a couple of days later, and it ended up being quite a long one, but I hope that you found something useful or interesting from watching it, and I hope to see you in the next one. So thanks very much for watching.